So, this webinar session is on the topic of making the case to authors for open access books with a focus on the African continent. A lot of the work that we at the Open Book Collective have done with our colleagues so far in Africa has suggested that whilst there is quite a high level of enthusiasm and interest amongst many librarians and publishers in different countries, perhaps the level of understanding and awareness amongst authors has not been so high. So we're going to hear from a selection of speakers in different roles related to OA books. And our host today is going to be Osmal Al-Jaridi, who is joined us from Spark Africa, so that's great. So I will hand over to him now, and he will give a word on the speakers before we begin.
Thank you very much, Judith. So my name is Osman Al-Adiri. I'm part of Spark Africa on the executive committee side. I'm also a medical doctor, and we've been working with Judith and the rest of the colleagues here for the past couple of months to bring this webinar. We're very happy that some of you could join us, and the others will be receiving this webinar recorded. So I'd like to start with introducing our speakers for today. You'll hear from them the most. They're going to be the star of this show. So, and we would like to start with the first speaker here. It's going to be, sorry, I don't have the lineup. So who would like to be the first speaker? Perhaps Lucy?
Yeah, that's fine. I can go first.
Perfect. Yeah. Ladies goes first, usually. So I'll let Lucy introduce herself first. So Lucy?
Yeah, hi everyone. Glad to be here. My name's Lucy Barnes. I'm Senior Editor and Outreach Coordinator at Open Book Publishers. I've got a few slides. Shall I share those now or? Yeah, sure. So hopefully you can see those. And I'm going to talk a bit about making the case for open access books. Obviously, I'm going to be talking from a European context, and so I'm really interested to find out more about what commonalities and differences there are with the situation in Africa, and what kind of resources and arguments you've got and that you're using to make the case for open access books. But Open Book Publishers is a leading scholar-led non-profit open access press based in Cambridge in the UK. We're a mission-driven press, and so as we're founded by scholars, the motivation was to make research freely accessible everywhere. But also there was a focus on the author and not putting barriers in the author's way when they want to publish open access. So as a result, we're a press that doesn't charge readers because we're open access, but we also don't charge authors. At the moment, we're publishing around 50 open access books per year. All of our books are open access. And we don't typically commission. So we're not usually trying to approach a specific author and say, please come publish with us. We're fortunate that we get lots of high quality proposals that we're able to choose from. And so it's not so much that we're trying to approach specific authors, but in the course of a lot of the work that we do and that I do as the outreach coordinator, we have a lot of contact and conversations with researchers. We do a lot of advocacy work. And so we hear a lot about what might be holding authors back from publishing either with us or publishing open access more broadly. And so I'm drawing on those conversations and that knowledge in this presentation. So these are some of the things that authors tend to raise that they're unsure about, worried about, concerned about when they might be thinking about publishing open access. So the first obviously is money. They're normally worried if they have to pay a high fee or if their funder might have to pay a high fee to publish an open access book. And, you know, in sort of the UK, you can look at fees from between £5,000 up to £20,000 or even more for a single book. They're also concerned sometimes about royalty payments. Not that academics typically make huge amounts of money on royalties, but there's a perception, I think, that open access means there won't be any sales and therefore they won't receive any royalties. And also it can be the case that it's because you're a small press like OBP, you might have very thin margins and therefore not be able to pay royalties. So that can be a concern. There can be a perception that there isn't a wider audience for their work. So there's no point publishing open access because either the work is too niche and people won't be interested, or because it's too specialist and people won't understand it, and they're sort of slightly different flavors of that argument, I think. Then there's an argument that there is no access problem, so we don't need open access. And this argument tends to come from people who are in sort of fairly wealthy institutions with very well-stocked libraries who find that they can access all the material that they need, and therefore, what's the big deal? This is a particularly frustrating argument to encounter, but you do encounter it. Some people are concerned about specific aspects of open access. So, for example, third-party material. They might want to include lots of images in their work and be worried that they either can't do that if it's open access, or that it will be very difficult and require lots of money to get the rights to do so. Some people think open access is only online and they want their nice hardback copy of their book. Increasingly, we're seeing concerns about AI and open access. And sort of, people are nervous or worried about their work being used to create LLMs or to feed into LLMs and other uses. And so they sometimes think that paywalled work is more protected from that kind of usage. Although actually, as we're seeing from, deals like the one that Informa has done, that's not necessarily the case. They may equally well, their work may be exposed to AI, but it is a concern. And also there's concerns around OBP, not so much as an open access press, but as a small publisher, which does not have the reputation of, say, some of the large university presses. And then authors might be concerned that if they publish with us, their work might not have the exposure and the prestige that it might have if they went with a more well-known press. So we address these conceptions in a number of different ways. One of them is advocacy. So we have one of the ways that we fund ourselves that we don't have to charge authors is that we have a network of library members in different countries who pay a small amount per year to help support our work. And as part of that, they often ask us to go and speak to their academics or to their librarians or a mix of both. And that's a really good opportunity to address some of these myths and talk about some of the concerns that authors might have. I'm also one of the coordinators of the Open Access Books Network, which is a free and open network, and we have events that we put on, resources that we create that try to tackle some of the concerns that authors might have around open access. So we have a resource called the OA Mythbusters. These are short videos around 2 minutes long that take a specific myth related to open access. For example, there is no access problem, and sort of tackles that myth. We also put on events that might tackle a certain issue, like we had an event in November about third-party materials and open access books featuring an author, a publisher, a legal expert, and an open GLAM expert who all sort of tackled this issue and how you can negotiate it as an author. We also talk about the limitations of closed access, again, partly to sort of counter this idea that there's no problem, but also to sort of make it very clear to people that their work could be read much more widely if they went an open access route. And one thing that I wish we had more of is evidence from readers who say, actually, I wouldn't have been able to read this book if it had been closed access, but it's open access, and therefore I've used it in these different ways. And that can be really hard to get that information just because by virtue of a book being open access, you don't have a direct connection necessarily with the readers because they're not having to log in, they're not having to pay. So it'd be good to get more evidence of that kind, I think. And then another way that we tackle this issue is to get authors who have published with us to talk to their peers. Because it's one thing me telling them it's great to publish open access, but it's a different thing if a colleague tells them, actually, I published this way and it was really good for these reasons. So we do that in different ways. There are collections of case studies from authors on resources like the Open Access Books Toolkit, which is an online resource that addresses open access book publishing from the author's perspective, and the COPEN Compass, which we've recently released from the COPEN community. Both of those resources are very much kind of European focused, and I'd be interested to hear, is there anything similar in an African context, or maybe could we think about opening up those resources a bit more so that they're more representative of different parts of the world? And then we also get authors, if they're particularly keen to champion what we do, who will speak for us at webinars or write blog posts for us or give us feedback that we can put on our website about, it was really great publishing with you because, and we have an author who's on our board who's done this for us a couple of times, and the response from the audiences is always really positive because it's a peer who's speaking to them, and because she's not talking as a publisher, she's saying, this was really good for me as an academic and this is why. We also put a lot of information on our website, so think arguments about the benefits of open access, and also information about us as a press to try and tackle some of those concerns that I mentioned about the fact that we're a smaller press. So we talk about the rigorous peer review that we have. We talk about where our books are reviewed. We talk about prize-winning books and prizes that they've won, where the books are indexed, all just to try and counter this idea that because we're a smaller press, that means their book won't be as visible. We can say, no, actually, it will be visible. It will be rewarded and recognised. And similarly, we have testimonies from authors about why publishing with us was great. We put that online. If they tell us it wasn't great, we don't necessarily put that online, but fortunately, not many authors tell us that, so that's fine. And we also have a letter online from our managing editor and co-director, Alessandra Tosi, which is addressed to tenure committees or interview panels, which an author can download, which explains why the press is an excellent one to publish with. And in general, we say to authors as a piece of advice, if you're concerned about this, then on your CV or in your application letter or at your interview, talk about why you chose a press like ours and what it did for you and what it did for your work. So to kind of contextualize that choice and try and tackle that prestige issue. And then finally, we also obviously try and show the benefits of open access as much as we can. So one obvious way is through usage statistics. Each book of ours has a graph and data online that shows the number of times it's been downloaded from certain platforms. And that obviously demonstrates the exposure that your work can get when it's OA. Some of that data also has geographical information, so an author can see where their book's been downloaded and read. And that might be particularly important, obviously, if their work focuses on a particular region. They can be really motivated by seeing it's also being read there. And in a similar vein, if people are researching and writing about people and about communities, then being able to make sure that those people and communities have access to that work is really important. We have a series editor who's written a powerful blog post for us about this, where he basically says he thinks it's immoral to be writing about people and then for them not to be able to access that writing and that research. So that can be a powerful argument. Then the ability to reach a more general audience. So this, again, might be particularly important if you want, as an author, to reach, say, a policy-making audience who might not engage with academic work if it's expensive, or a public audience, of course, as well. And then you can have certain subject topics where you think, well, actually, this fits really well with open access. So if you're an author who's writing about equity or about social justice, why would you publish that book with a commercial publisher that will charge huge amounts of money for it and take a hefty slice of profit from those sales when it could be open access, it could be read by everybody? And then we've also been thinking a bit more about academic freedom as well, particularly in the light of what's been happening in America. But of course, it's not only happening in America, where there is increasingly censorship of what can be researched and what can be published. Obviously, open access can't sort of help with the research that's being done, but once that research is published, it's much harder to censor and to stifle if it's open access. And there have been examples in the US where published research has been censored and messed with, and you sort of can't do that so easily when it's open access. And finally, of course, for OBP, because we're a press that doesn't charge authors, we can say, well, look, there's no financial barrier either. So that's a kind of a good thing, that you can get all these benefits and you don't have to pay a huge fee for the privilege. So that was all that I had, and I'm very happy to answer questions or to particularly to hear more from the other speakers as well about the kinds of arguments that they're using. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That was amazing. I'll move now to the next speaker, and then once we have all of the speakers, we can go back to asking questions, and then we can have a discussion afterwards. So our next speaker will be Wikus van Zyl. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Who's the manager of the University of Johannesburg Press, which publishes open access books with the Open Monograph platform. So Wikus, we're glad to have you here with us.
Thank you so much. Let me share. I'm just going to put on presentation mode. There we go. So thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to share a bit about UJ Press's open access publishing, specifically our book publishing, and how we engage our authors. So UJ Press publish both open access books and journals. We have about 22 journals online on an open journal system. 16 of them are Diamond Open Access journals. We publish around 33 titles per year. We have a backlist of 191 titles, of which 80% is open access. So we often find authors have a lot of concerns in terms of open access, the same as Lucy also mentioned. Firstly, in our context, usually the book processing charges that international presses charge are unaffordable for the local audience. So making sure that book processing charges, if they're charged, are reasonable and in line with the funding available that authors have. Authors are also concerned about their copyright. They need to be educated about the third-party content inside their manuscripts. Also, making sure that they understand the Creative Commons licenses and what each of them means, the usage, and the permissions that each of those licenses give them in terms of the use of their materials. Then, as mentioned, the book processing charges is very often a barrier to authors in the African context. That's why with UJ Press, we decided to never make funding a requirement for publication. The quality of the publication will always be the deciding factor for making the publication decision. It can never be the availability of funding. Then also, authors are very often concerned about the reputation of publishers, and that's specifically because predatory publishers have really created a bad reputation for the charging of book processing charges, and authors are very wary of publishers who charge processing charges. And then the perceived quality of open access books, and also making sure that authors are aware that open access books go through all of the quality control measures that regular publications go through, that it's not any different in terms of quality than any other publications. So one thing that I also encountered was that as soon as you mention book processing charges, some authors think it's vanity publishing, pay to get published. And that's where you also have to be very diligent in making the message that the availability of funding is not the publication deciding factor. The quality of the publication is, and the publication decision is made after a peer review process, after a quality control screening has been done. Another consideration for authors is how accessible is their books. And that's where publishers have to be very aware that they have to make these open access books available in a variety of formats, including PDF, EPUB, audio formats, XML formats, to make it as usable as possible and accessible as possible. I also mentioned the predatory publishers, that where ethics come in. And then authors are very often concerned about the loss of royalties, and if their print versions will continue selling if the electronic version is open access. And that is where publishers have to educate authors and show them examples of where the print sales went up because of the electronic version being made available open access. And that's also very important to make the metrics available, as Lucy mentioned. Show your authors the usage of their titles, show where it's being used, where it's being downloaded. We provide our authors with information like Google Books stats, DOAB stats, Crossref stats, so that they can see how their books are used, where it's used, for them to see the benefit of having their books made available open access. And then also as publishers, we have to be very aware of the risks involved with large language models, generative AI, and the intellectual property contained in books. Generally, if we use the correct Creative Commons license, the works should be protected, but include this information in your contracts as well, so that authors are aware that you do protect their content. Or if you do allow access to large language models, be clear about it. And then just some key takeaways. So always make open access the author's choice. Open access should never be forced on authors. It should be their choice to publish in open access, and also make a variety of open access publishing options available. We have gold open access, diamond open access, green open access. Make a variety of choices available to authors, even open access after an embargo period, so that authors always know that they're in control and that they have a choice in the matter. And then as publishers, we have to really make sure that our books reach their intended market, that we market the books sufficiently, that we give the books the right exposure, that we ensure that the books are reviewed in journals, so that authors can see the quality and the standard of these open access publications. And then lastly, also just to share success stories where authors have had good experiences. We, for instance, had one book where after we made it available open access, it has now been translated into 2 different languages. It has reached a completely different market that it previously did. And even the print version is now being revived because of the open access version doing so well. And I will also be open to questions, and I'm looking forward to the presentations from the other presenters as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Wikus. Thank you for speaking from the publisher's side. Our next speaker will also be speaking from the publisher's side. Our next speaker is Joe DeVille, who's the co-founder and editor at the Mattering Press. Joe is a scholar. Joe is the co-founder for Mattering Press, which is a scholar-led open access publisher in science and technology studies. So we're very glad to have you, Joe.
Well, actually, I think I was going to pass over straight to Jocelyn because we reduced the time for this webinar. So I would suggest we pass to Jocelyn. And then if there's any particular, I'm happy to offer some reflections from the perspective of a publisher. But yeah, it's just we do that.
Yeah, sure. So Jocelyn will be speaking from the librarian side. Jocelyn is the deputy librarian at the Chinoy University of Technology. She's also the current Open Access Collective Grant awardee, and is developing a new sustainable infrastructure for open access book publishing at the university. Jocelyn, would you like to start introducing yourself a bit further and then go ahead with the presentation?
Thank you, Osman. Greetings. Can you confirm if you can hear?
Yes.
There's some connectivity challenges.
Yes, I think so.
Thank you so much. I think you have done justice to the introduction, Osman, so I'll go straight to the presentation. So thank you for inviting. I'll be presenting about making the case to authors for open access books, and I'm talking from the perspective. So I would like to start by thanking the Open Book Collective for assisting us in ensuring that we manage to have our first library press which publishes open access books in Zimbabwe. So through that grant, we are establishing the CAT Library Press, which will be responsible for publishing open access books. So as librarians, the strategies that we have employed and that have worked as we engaged with the authors to publish open access books, we have emphasized on the issue of visibility and impact. So as we are engaging with the authors, as we are creating awareness about open access book publishing, we talked about the issue of visibility, how their output will be very, very visible to the global community. And we gave examples of other open access platforms whereby we indicated the issue of downloads, the issue of citations, and how the people were accessing their books globally and how they were citing them, how they were viewing those books, how they were downloading those, and also have managed to look for other authors within the institution. We have published open access so that they can share their success stories as a way of encouraging other researchers to publish open access. So from these activities that we're doing, we've managed to create like a zeal for publishing open access books. And just yesterday, we released our expression of interest just to see how people are interested in our project. And so far, one have submitted, I've responded to the expression of interest, and I've received 5 calls so far of people who are interested in contributing. And also from Chinoy University of Technology, we've got 10 schools and 2 institutes. And people, as we talking about the issue of open access book publishing. They were interested in publishing a book from each school and from each institute so that they'll be able to be visible. So we've emphasized the issue of visibility and impact. And we've also talked about the issue of academic recognition and prestige, which deals with the issue of publishing open access. And in the process, we were demystifying the myths surrounding open access publishing. I'm happy Lucy and Vikas have managed to point out some of those issues. And we've been talking about the reputable university presses and academic book publishers that have been publishing books so that people will understand that we are a reputable open access publisher as well. And then we talked about the issue of how open access book publishing will support them for promotion and tenure. You know, as researchers, as academics, people are encouraged to publish and then so that they'll be able to apply for promotion and tenure. So these are the major strategies that we have been employing as librarians in trying to create awareness about open access book publishing, mainly looking at our new kid on the block, the CAT Library Press. So, so far what has worked for us in our engagement with the authors in terms of creating awareness about open access book publishing, the issue of advocacy. We have been advocating for open access book publishing from the management side. We have talked about this and I'm happy. They were happy also about the grant that we managed to get as the library, and they were supportive. And they are also continuously supporting us to ensure that our project becomes a success. And we've also partnered with the research office. What we do in all our publishing endeavors within the library, we always work with the Research and Postgraduate Center because they are responsible for research activities within the institution. So as we advocate for it, researchers tend to understand it more, and we get also more time to engage with researchers in trying to create awareness of open access book publishing. So also under here there's awareness creation, whereby as the library we are holding regular sessions on open access book publishing, so that even those who were not aware of it, they end up knowing that no, if I publish open access, I will have global reach. And then we've also demonstrated how open access books are indexed in major databases, taking, for example, the Directory of Open Access Books. At the end, people tend to understand that no, we are not talking about vanity publishing here, but we are talking about authentic publishers who ensure that our books are indexed in those major databases. And we also talk about the benefits of open access. This one have greatly worked for us because we're taking from the journals that we have been publishing as the library. Currently, we host 4 Diamond Open Access journals, and we point to those, telling the researchers, look at how the visibility is in terms of how we were publishing open access journals. The same applies for books, and researchers tend to understand more as we'll be engaging with them. And then the issue of addressing funding concerns. You know, because of the economic situations that we are currently in, it might be very, very difficult. But now we are talking about the library publishing program. Taking, for example, we have the APOS platform, the African Platform for Open Scholarship. That one have been very, very instrumental in our endeavors of publishing open access, both for journals and for books. For books, I'm happy that we now have the Open Monograph Press that is housed within the APOS platform, and every African institution that is willing to publish open access is open to join it. So that one has worked for us at Chinhoyi University of Technology. And also the issue of applying for grants from funders. We've managed to address the funding concerns. Taking, for example, I will talk about the Open Book Collective grant that I said that as Chinhoyi University of Technology Library, we managed to win that as a way of enhancing open access book publishing within the institution. And that have been very, very instrumental in our activities of making the case of open access book publishing. And then we also have encountered some challenges in terms of when we are advocating for open access book publishing. The first one is the issue of royalties. Authors always want royalties. They said, we want money to buy bread for the kids. So what we have done now, we are saying that, no, look at this. The electronic copy will be open access, Diamond Open Access, and then we'll print some copies. And then from the print version, that's where you will get some royalties. A certain percentage will be given to you after we sell those print copies. And then the issue of incentives. We are trying to work towards giving them some incentives for publishing open access so that those who are publishing open access will be encouraged, and then other people would want to join in so that they'll be able to get the royalties that they want from open access book publishing. And the issue of lack of funds for production costs, this one we have managed to deal with it by advocating for institutional support. Our institution is very supportive, and they are now trying to get a fund that will be able to cater for the production costs, as it were, so that we'll be able to continuously engage in this project even way after we are done with the OBC grant. And then the issue of also applying for grants that support open access book publishing, that one have been helped us in dealing with the issue of lack of funds for production costs. And then there's another issue of lack of awareness and understanding of what open access is. Some researchers, if you look at it, they are not familiar with open access books. Some of them, they know that I should pay book publishing charges for me to publish open access. Then we need to create awareness, especially in terms of the Diamond Open Access model. That is the one that we are talking about currently. Now we are telling them, no, that it is possible. The funds will be coming from somewhere, and then the researchers who are publishing, and then the readers, they don't need to pay anything for them to access. And then some, they don't even understand the publishing models for books. So we are trying to create awareness and let them know that this is how it works. And then the issue of limited open access book infrastructure. If you look at it from the African context, that one is a problem. But we are happy now. We can utilize the African Platform for Open Scholarship for us to be able to publish open access. So those are some of the challenges that we have encountered so far and how we have mitigated them. So I don't know if there are any questions. I'll be able to clarify on some of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn. That was really inspiring. I would also like to see the opportunity of having Joe on the call here on the webinar with us to ask him for some of his reflections on open book publishing and how is that related to the African continent.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I thought I'd just offer a few reflections from my position as a publisher. So I am involved in different initiatives. The way I really got involved in open access was through my work in setting up a very small publisher called Mattering Press. And Jocelyn and I, for example, have been talking actually because Jocelyn is also obviously involved in setting up a press. And I really sort of empathize with that kind of situation where you're starting up as a press and you need to start making that case for why, your first authors should publish with you. And I just want to offer a few perspectives of some of the way that we have made our case for authors, which maybe offer some, additional perspectives. And I won't spend too long on this, but let me just very briefly highlight just a few quick things here. So bear with me 1 second. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you can see that full screen. Is that full screen?
It's kind of, I think it's your presenter view, Joe. You can see the slides, but they're surrounded by
full screen.
Oh, yeah, that's full screen.
That's full screen.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So yeah, making a case for open access to authors. It's I would say it's and all the speakers I think have shown some really interesting ways to do that, and I think I can see very much in the work that we did a lot of similarities. So making a case around the quality of your books, making a case as to the benefits of open access, and I think in actual fact we've tried to do in different ways pretty much all of those, and I think they're all really, really essential, whether you're making a case to open access as a publisher or whether you're making a case for open access as a librarian. Just to say a quick word about Mattering Press and kind of who we are. So we're a very small open access press, as Osman mentioned earlier, focusing in the field of science and technology studies. We've published, I think it's getting towards 12 books or so in a wide range of different fields. We put a lot of emphasis on, I suppose, the quality of our books and we put a lot of attention to things like typesetting and so on. And I think that's obviously been important for us. It was also important for us to get on board some, people in our field that were well known, and I think helped kind of give our press credibility in those early days. So I wouldn't expect you to know who this is, but for example, this book here, Ghost Managed Medicine, is by an author called Sergio Sismondo, really influential figure in our field, and I think really helped us show other authors that we were a serious press. So I think all those kind of things are really important for whatever kind of press you are. And that has for us led to there have been some other kind of markers of success and prestige and so on. We won an award at a big conference in our field last year, which we're really happy about. And there you can kind of see some of us celebrating that. So all these kind of things around prestige, I think, are kind of helpful for they're problematic as well in all kinds of different ways. But also you're kind of sometimes forced to kind of play that game, even though you feel a bit uncomfortable about it. I think there are other ways we can also make a case to authors about the value of the work that we're doing, and I don't think we should forget those. I think we can also really focus on the considerable inequalities of academic publishing. Now, this resonates differently in different disciplines. So I'm a sociologist, and if I was speaking to a sociologist or maybe a politics scholar or somebody who perhaps works in development studies or somebody who perhaps works in anthropology, the kind of critically attuned social sciences, I think also including some of these arguments is also really helpful and can actually really, I suppose, make the case for why you might want to do open access in the first place, not just because it benefits us, but because there are also good reasons to do that. I won't kind of go into the details here, but Elsevier, for example, is a case study. Elsevier is a publisher, but actually run all these other services as well, and they're really sucking up a huge amount of money in the scholarly system, which so in the last financial year they made a 3.2 billion pound profit, about a $4 million profit, that is, from a revenue around 9.4 billion, so over 10 billion in US dollars at a 34% margin. A huge volume of the amount of money that is going to this one organization, the umbrella group, which is called the RELX Group. And I think I think sometimes it can be helpful also just to really remind academics this and say, there are also these kind of broader questions we need to attend to. My colleague Jeff Pooley has called this a moral indignity involving siphoning money, to, in the case of some of these digital platforms, access our own behavior. And this also, we can also see a kind of broader move in this space to consolidate the kind of infrastructures of publishing, including open access publishing, that we really need to push against. A range of services being bought up by commercial providers, sometimes for large amounts of money. And I think we, alongside making those cases for why it matters to individual authors, I think we can also make a case to them actually around some of these structural conditions, and that there's also a reason to push back. And our colleagues in an African context have obviously been doing that. So Reggie and colleagues have been talking about how the dominant publishing systems really contribute to the kind of northernizing of the scholarly publishing ecosystem. And I think that this is also an important context that, I'd be curious actually to hear, from my colleagues, who are working in African contexts, how these kind of arguments land. I mean, Reggie has obviously been making them very, very stridently. Those that attended the Diamond Open Access Summit in Cape Town in December saw these arguments being made in a room full of open access advocates. But how do these kind of arguments travel when we're engaging with authors? And there are other arguments that are being made as well around, for example, bibliodiversity. So how do these kind of arguments? So this is the argument that says, well, what we really need is an ecosystem, a publishing ecosystem that includes a wide range of different types of books in different languages by different publishers, focusing on a wide range of different subject areas. And this is something that we really should collaboratively work to preserve. And that brings me to my final point, that one of the things that we also sometimes highlight is this work of collaborating. I mean, we're obviously collaborating on this call. We've been collaborating in some of the initiatives that we do. And I think there's actual benefits for, in different contexts to actually think about between publishers and libraries, how we might collaborate. Some of the work that we've been involved in started with kind of collaboration, this group called Scholar-Led that we formed, thinking about how publishers can work together, thinking about how we can collaborate on publishing. And I think there's also huge opportunities to do that in an African context. I mean, we're seeing that with the African Platform for Open Scholarship that Jocelyn already mentioned. And we can see that in, the work of Spark Africa that Spark Africa is doing. And I would really encourage, those working in these kind of in an African context, think about how can we actually, share resources so we're not always reinventing the wheel. And of course, those working in other contexts would of course be happy as well to help with that collaboration. So those are just a few reflections that I wanted to share, and yeah, perhaps we can then open up to a collective discussion amongst those in the room.
Thank you very much, Joe. That was really informative. Before handing out to questions or, more reflections, is there anything that, some of those of you in the room would like to add? Like Mary, Wilbert, Judith, and all of those who have had experiences, with open book publishing, either in their own context, the European context, or an African context, that would like to add something.
Well, I mean, I have been speaking recently to academics as an academic on the experience of having published an OA book. And that is in a European context, although it's interesting that even in many particularly more traditional institutions here, the understanding and awareness of OA amongst academics is quite low. And I have had some concerns raised to me, which, although I don't have necessarily ready answers for them, I wonder if they kind of translate into other contexts. For instance, some people have been concerned about the preservation and archiving of open access material and worried about what's going to happen if I publish with an online publisher and then something happens to them, or is my work going to be properly preserved and have a persistent link? Some people have raised concerns about indexing and the indexing of metrics, which, that is in many ways problematic. And I think we all know about the sort of mm, inequalities and issues inherent in some of the the metricizing systems. And yet that is something also that academics bring up as a concern. But in some ways, I've been able to demonstrate and counter those concerns a bit by showing how much more enthusiasm and general interest and broader readership, and even to an extent, some small amount of media interest that I've had in the works that I've published OA. Also, the concern for royalties has come up, even which really surprised me because I don't think that, I've ever imagined that I would be receiving any kind of royalties from an academic book, but people have raised that here as well. So I think that in some ways some some common themes as well as the context dependent issues, I think.
Thank you, Judith.
I guess I could come in with a couple of things if
Yes, Robert.
Awesome.
Yes.
Just picking up on sorry, so I'm Rupert Gatti, and I'm also involved in Open Book Publishers with Lucy, and just a couple of things that come up as well. One of the things that I think especially smaller publishers and open access publishers can do is engage a little bit more with some of the technology innovations that are coming along. It's not that one's sort of stuck into a rut of publication based on sort of legacy models. And although digital publishing doesn't necessarily need to be open access, the two of them do go together quite nicely. And so one can do a little bit more sometimes with an open access mindset and engage with material that's out there, engage with material that are hosted in libraries, with database materials, connecting to research data. So you can do a little bit more sometimes if you take an open access mentality into it. And therefore the academic can do more. And recognizing that and discussing with authors when they've come with saying, have you thought about doing the following things and adding to the book in these ways? it really enhances the book and gives real value to the authors that they hadn't really necessarily seen when they just thought of sort of legacy publishing as the route ahead. And similarly, sometimes academic publishing is dominated by sort of Western and, as Joe was saying, commercial interests and definitions of what quality is and what scholarship is and what topics of interest are and what areas people should be researching if they want to be deemed to be recognized as global scholars and things. And this is defined by those very commercial entities that Joe was identifying. And one of the things that Open Access has done is expand the reach, as we've heard from many people, the reach of the works, so that works that are what the author wants to do can get out to a global audience and be engaged with a global audience, and don't need to be given any grace and bearing by the commercial entities. It doesn't necessarily meet their requirements, but it's what the author, in the author's knowledge as a researcher, is able to get that out. And so again, it frees up the types of knowledge that can be engaged with. And then finally, I wanted to pick up, a few people have mentioned it was true absolutely for open book publishers as well. It's quite useful to have some big names coming in early to reassure authors. But even more important is the quality of making sure that the research that one publishes is high quality. And in our case, we also got some really positive responses, because some authors with big names that produced works that weren't very good and we turned down, grumbled publicly about how terrible it was that their work had been turned down, and what were these upstart publishers doing turning my work down. And of course, everybody looked at that and took us seriously. And so sticking to quality and saying, and everybody said, wow, okay, these guys must be serious. If they're turning down that person, then you know what, there's a serious quality assessment going on here. And therefore took us seriously because of that. So it's not just who you publish, it's also what you publish, and being honest to one's standards and letting that be that transparent that people can say, okay, those are the standards and I've got respect for that. So that's my 10p worth.
Thank you very much, Rupert. Any more comments or reflections before going on to questions?
If you allow me, Osman,
Yeah, please.
I'm gonna put in the chat here because I've just copied pasted it from Google. But that's a saying in the African setup. Chinua Achebe, as you all know, is one of our greatest writers. And the reason I put this up is because, speaking from an infrastructural point of view, digital infrastructure, I realize, and I totally agree with what the publisher's view is and the librarian view is, that for authors, especially in Africa, it has become increasingly important to feel that they own and that they're in control of the content that they put out there. And in that same way, it has become increasingly difficult for authors to make that decision of whether to insist on putting their content in their localized infrastructure, or to accept help from the global north, so to speak. But I think this is a discourse that should be brought to light, even when we speak to others, especially those of us who understand and appreciate what collaboration is all about. The issues that affect Africa, I think for others, especially researchers, this will be a very good laying ground. I don't know whether I'm using the right word here, but they will identify with the fact that we are going to use the knowledge we produce, at the books, the journals, the research that's done in Africa, to solve African issues. And how do we do that if we do not let what the research that we have done be consumed by others beyond Africa? So actually, open access is the biggest tool that we may have at the moment to let that consumption continue. And why I use this statement is because we are an infrastructure from the global north. I had this conversation taking place when we were in UCT, and in so many other setups where I've had this conversation. But most of the stakeholders here, especially in this call, for example, are interested in collaborating to make open access a global common. So it is in our own interest, both African, European, American, to speak in one voice, to have the same vision, and that we invite you to collaborate with us does not necessarily mean that you do not have the resources. In most cases, yes, we might lack those resources, but does not necessarily mean that you don't have the resources. It actually means it is more powerful if we work together. So if you have a publisher who is willing to publish your work, like OBP, if you have Mattering Press that is willing to publish your work, so the decision on where and what to publish should be solely based on what is the goal of my publication. And I think for others, it's very important for them to understand the goal of open access from that context. Of course, so much has been said about royalties, about finances and all that. And I would end my reflections by saying we cannot ignore that there is probably the issue of if I have used my money as an author to pay for whatever. It doesn't have to be a BPC in this case. For any process of my research, then I would expect something in return. But I think it's important to educate our publishers, especially in the local context, about business models that can help others to overcome these financial challenges. I'm happy to. I don't want to take more time. I think we don't have a lot of time to have our own thoughts go further, but I'm happy to hear. Especially, I will leave with a question here. After listening to Lucy and Wikus and Joe and Jocelyn, do you see a situation where the decision to public open access, especially in the African context, is influenced by disciplines, so that you will find, of course, I think in our case it is, but is it the same in Africa? Do you find most humanities want to publish in OA while the other little, technical disciplines that they call themselves, do they want to publish not in OA? And is there a reason this is? So I'll stop there and leave that cliffhanger. Thank you, Osman, and everyone for listening.
Thank you very much, Mary. And you left us with a wonderful question. Well, that question could go, for hours, to answer it. Before giving my own reflections, I'd like to hear if there is anyone else who would like to have the space to speak a bit further.
I hope this means I can ask a question.
Sure.
So thanks for all the contributions. And there are so many questions popping in my head. I've come into open access publishing relatively recently. I was in commercial educational publishing, so that's a whole mindset shift. But a couple of questions that occurred to me. For the publishers, do you publish mainly senior scholars, or do you also have early career scholars on your imprints? And what has that been? What's the difference between those two experiences? Why I ask this question is many of for example, the students who have to graduate with their master's or their PhD, they have to publish, and they usually go for journal articles, and they want to publish quickly. So is a book chapter a route for them to be able to publish as well? How fast is that process? Because we see many students just jumping right into the predatory publishing, and you want to graduate and that's it. My other question is around partnerships with university presses. If any of the publishers has had any experience partnering with an African university press. Of course, I realize University of Johannesburg is an African press, but the idea is, have you partnered with a university press that's just starting out and they're trying to do something similar, open access publishing, especially for their scholars? And then my last question is around the digital platforms. One of the things that I'm experiencing is when registering, like on some digital platforms, they have long forms that you have to fill, and for each platform you have to fill a form, and it's similar information. Is this only open to publishers, or can authors who have edited a book, can they also register their own single publications? Thanks.
I'll take the question to our speakers.
Maybe either Vikas or Jocelyn should answer first, to provide a reflection from the African side.
I can give some reflection. We have partnered with some African presses. So in South Africa, all of the university presses collaborate in terms of sharing information about how we do Diamond open access publishing, how we do open access publishing, what types of platforms we are working on. So we have two platforms. The one is the Publishers Association, National Scholarly Book Publishers Forum, and then we've got the ASAF Scholarly Book Publishers Forum as well, where we share information, and that is specifically for university presses. But then internationally also, we're partnering with the Association of University Presses, and there we share information about platforms and business models and things like that, which is very, very useful.
Thank you very much, Vikas. Jocelyn, would you like to add something?
Okay, thank you, Osman. In terms of partnership, we're still starting. So we are the ones who are now looking for those who are well established, so that we can follow suit and learn from their experiences, or their do's and don'ts. We are learning from those who have been established for a long time. So that's why we've been working with Joe, for example, trying to get hold of what they are doing at Mentoring Press. And we have also been talking to those at African Minds. We've been talking to the UCT Press, so as to learn from their experiences per se. So as a upcoming publishing press, we are learning from those who are established within the field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn.
And maybe I can answer about early career scholars. So yeah, that's a really good one. I mean, from a Mentoring Press perspective, I mean, obviously I mentioned, that publishing some established scholars was very important for the press. And, I would very much agree with what Rupert said around, I don't think a press, you should ever sort of sell yourself down the river and, just publish the big name because they're a big name, right? You need to make sure that the quality control is there and so on. But actually, as a press, Mentoring Press in general, we actually prioritize early career scholars, actually. So we were really keen to give early career scholars a route to publication. And specifically, we wanted to give them, when we set up the press, we were early career scholars ourselves. And we felt that And that's partly the reason, the motivation for setting up the press was that we had some, to be honest, unsatisfactory publishing experiences with some larger commercial presses. And we felt that early career scholars could really benefit from greater levels of sort of mentorship and some editorial insight from a press. And I don't want to kind of oversell that because, of course, there's capacity constraints. It means there's a limit to the extent to which you can do that. But I think that's one of the reasons that we set up was to offer early career scholars that kind of route. And if you look at our press, the mix of kind of authors, they do include some people who, when they published their book, were really at the very beginnings of their career. We've had at least, I can think of at least, I think 2, maybe 3 monographs that were, and bear in mind, we've only published like 15 or something, or 12, I can't remember the exact number, but small number of monographs. But that were people's PhD that was then turned into a book. And that's actually one of the things we really wanted to do as a press, because if you have ever had an experience of working with a PhD and turning into a book, you will realize that that is a real kind of art in a way. PhDs are formatted in a very particular way, and to turn it into a book might require quite a bit of work and reconfiguration, and that can be quite difficult, I think, for an early career scholar coming straight from their PhD. So I think, that's something that I certainly think that presses can offer if they're interested in doing that as a service. And in terms of, authors jumping straight into journals, I mean, of course, we can all understand the pressures that face early career scholars, as much, as sometimes later in their career as well. But I think Judith has talked very eloquently about this as an early career scholar at some point in her career as well, that there are actually real benefits that come from publishing open access that I think sometimes early career scholars don't actually fully realize. Vikas mentioned, for example, books being unexpectedly translated and so on. And I think we can certainly highlight that while recognizing that we can't, dictate to early career scholars what they should do, because they're in a really difficult position. We have to kind of empathize with that.
Yeah, but I think that reach is such, I mean, I do think that more academics are recognizing now that it's about more than a number in a database. It's about the reach of your work. It's about people's ability to access it in different places, in different contexts. That in some ways that kind of openness can maybe be at least as advantageous, if not more advantageous, than traditional metrics of quote unquote success.
Mm. Thank you very much, Judith and Joe, for that. Inspiring. I think we're coming up to the end of this webinar, so I'd like to end up with a very brief question. And my question goes to Jocelyn. Some people might be hearing this webinar recorded in a few, days, weeks, or months. And I would like you to end with just a few sentences about your experience, establishing your university press or your open book publishing presses, and what are some devices would you bring to the table here that would benefit those who would like to start their own presses in navigating the resources and navigating the knowledge that is around there for open book publishing in Africa?
Okay, thank you, Osman. In terms of my experience, the issue of teamwork is key. I've learned a lot from quite a number of people, from the people that I'm working with at University of Technology, and also from the people that have walked the walk already, those that are well established within the publishing industry. There's need to take some notes from those who have done it, so that we learn the do's and don'ts, so that we share experiences, so that we know, although I know that the landscapes we are operating on are different, taking, for example, those who are operating from the global north, the experiences might be different from those who are operating from the global south, like what we are doing. but the experiences are more or less the same. So there's need to find those who have done it before and learn on the best practices per se, on what to do and what not to do. And I've also learned that teamwork is key. There's need to establish a team that is enthusiastic in open access publishing so that the press will be vibrant. And also there's need for advocacy. You can't do this without institutional support. Taking, for example, if it is a university press like us, you need the support of the university management for you to carry forward. Otherwise, the project will be doomed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn. Thank you very much to all of our speakers and all of those who attended. That was a very inspiring webinar. We would love to hear from you, your feedback. You can definitely reach out to all of the speakers, at any minute. Their contact information will be shared. Thank you very much again for having this very productive conversations, and thanks to all of the partners who did make this possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Osman. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.